We began to tell you earlier in the show about Citibank agreeing to pay $7 billion to settle the federal and state investigation into the sale of defective mortgage investments during the subprime housing boom. And here to talk to us about where this money goes and what this means is Kevin Whelan, who is the National Campaign Director for Home Defenders League, an organization of underwater homeowners affected by the foreclosure crisis. And he is with us live from Minneapolis. Welcome to Rise America, Kevin. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, let's take a step back. Explain what Citibank did wrong here that led to this investigation and now this settlement. Where was the transgression?
So Citibank, along with all the other major banks, did a couple of things wrong. They sold predatory and toxic mortgages to communities all over the country. And particularly targeted African American and Latino communities for expensive and pricey loans, loans with hidden fees and tricks, and just generally loans that they knew, although no homeowner would want a loan that goes bad, that they knew full well might go bad in the end.
Okay.
But doing that isn't what they're getting in trouble for today. It's for then packaging those loans and selling them to investors, insurers, and other banks and saying these loans are great, people can definitely pay these back, knowing full well they couldn't. So it's really this round of settlements, and the settlement today is about banks and investors ripping off each other by selling their predatory and toxic mortgages to each other as securities.
So as it's been reported, it's a $7 billion settlement. As I understand it, $2.5 billion of that will go to consumer relief. I want to talk about that in just a second. Where does this $4.5 billion go?
The rest of it, there's a civil fine, so that goes to the government. It goes to the Justice Department, and then some of it goes to individual states. Some number of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to some different states that had claims under the settlement. So there's nothing that we know of that says the money that goes to the federal government and the civil fine would necessarily be used to help the families and communities that are most still suffering from the foreclosure crisis, but we certainly think that it should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does make sense. So then this $2.5 that is specifically earmarked for consumer relief, what does that mean?
Really, it means doing some of what the banks sometimes do and should be doing much more anyway. A lot of it is for principal reduction, or other loan modifications, which simply means writing down loans to the value that houses have now post-crash. So there's millions of people, about 10 million people in America left after Wall Street crashed the housing market, paying on loans for more than their house is now worth. And it's not because the person paying that loan did anything wrong. It's just because they bought a house at a time and a place before the crash and now owe more. Even if they paid forever, they'll never catch up. The house is underwater. So it makes sense for banks to reduce those loans. Under the settlement, Citigroup has agreed to do a bunch of that, some other modifications to loans to make them affordable. And then other relief for programs like first-time home buyers or people who have lost their houses to foreclosure, being able to buy houses or rental assistance that are all good things if they really do happen.
What about the people who have already lost their homes that just could not stay above the water? Does this help them in any way?
There's nothing directly for people in the settlement that have already lost their homes. And that's a tragedy because it's people that were fighting for their homes that really raised the cry to demand the settlement. I was part of a group of hundreds of people that marched on the Justice Department last year demanding that they prosecute the banks and the bankers who crashed the economy and deliver some relief. So there are some things in the settlement that are intended to help some families or communities at large with things like affordable rental housing or home loans to people who might have lost their houses to foreclosure at some point in the past years. And those are good things. And it certainly will help if people who are now struggling to get modifications, people who are trying to get out from underwater loans get help. But trillions of dollars in wealth, disproportionately in African American and Latino communities, have been lost in this housing crisis, and none of that is coming back under this or other settlements. So it can help but it's a long way from justice for people who've already lost their homes or the communities impacted.
Yeah, I think I heard you say trillion with a TR, and of course this is a billion with a B settlement. It's a very interesting backstory here. At first, as I understand it, Citigroup agreed to pay $360 some odd million, and of course the government was not satisfied with that, ultimately came back and said they needed to pay $12 billion, and then the investigation, or excuse me, the negotiation ensued, and this is where they came out. I'm just wondering, Kevin, in general, how do you feel about this settlement? Because in the midst of this $7 billion settlement, there is no admission of wrongdoing, certainly no criminal charges.
That's right. You know, the settlement, one good thing about the settlement is it doesn't preclude criminal charges. So while it's late, it's not too late for some banker to be arrested for the crimes that brought down the world economy and hurt so many homeowners and communities. But we're not holding our breath. And while it's not enough or as much as it should be for all the damage that was caused, it's a victory for people who fought for some kind of accountability, that there is a settlement and that, you know, billions is real money. But it's only going to make a difference if it really happens. And looking at the past, some of the past settlements, especially the huge J.P. Morgan settlement that was announced with similar fanfare last year, we unfortunately have not seen families getting help from that. There have been families that have been fighting to stay in their homes, and the settlement has not helped them. The relief has simply never arrived. And if that happens, you know, that the banks get out of a lot of liability, criminal and otherwise, that they should have had by agreeing to relief, and then it never arrives, that would really be a triple tragedy.
That would indeed. Kevin Whelan, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice to talk to you.